because it's quite important, because I think that we're in the early days of something and it can be laughed at, or what's the ROI, or, you know, I don't want to be confused up here by somebody who loves technology. I did not own a computer until I was 19 years old. My filter to the world is very simple. I'm a businessman, and so when I think about the world, no matter what I'm doing, whether in 1996 launching a .com for my family wine business, even though I didn't own a computer, or whatever I'm doing in my life, it's always predicated to one place. How do I sell whatever I'm trying to sell at that moment? The filter is business. Social media has, and let's start with this, I'll even take a step back. Social media is just a term that we're using to describe the websites that matter in our world today. We called a lot of this stuff Web 2.0 just 3 or 4 years ago. Go Google Facebook Web 2.0. Millions of people referred to Facebook as a Web 2.0 company before we started calling this stuff social media. So let's get our minds wrapped around the idea that social media is just a term we're referring to the internet itself. And when you start understanding that social media is reference to the internet itself, to the state of the internet right now, all of a sudden it becomes much harder to not believe in it. All of a sudden it feels less like a fad. All of a sudden the context of the whole conversation changes. So to me, social media is a term we use to reference 7 to 15 sites that are making a lot of noise in the world. They're all still built on the backbone of the internet. How many people in this room, by show of hands, and don't half-ass me, I know you're probably tired, but like full hand, how many people in this room know my spiel, know about my career, know who I am? Raise your hand. That actually feels good, thank you very much. You know, I expected it from my family members that I see over there, but the rest of you, so this is more than usual. So you know what? Then I won't go back into my background too much since there's so many, but for the 10 or 20% of you, I'll just give you this little context. I come from the filter of being an immigrant. I was born in Belarus in the former Soviet Union. I came here when I was 3 years old. We lived in Queens, and my dad got a job as a stock boy in a liquor store and commuted from Queens to New Jersey. Eventually became the manager of that store, and we moved to Edison, New Jersey. And so a lot of how I think about what social's about or where we are today, it's all about one thing. It's about bringing value, right? If you don't bring value, you don't win. And that is very much ingrained when you have a family business. My dad eventually bought the store he worked for and then eventually opened another store in Springfield, New Jersey, which is where I kind of started working in the family business. When I was 5 and a half, 6, I started a very substantial business. It was a lemonade stand franchise. I put my 6 friends in the neighborhood to work. They worked behind the counter of the lemonade stands, and I used to, how many of you remember Big Wheels, those little bikes? I used to ride my Big Wheels around Edison, New Jersey, picking up my cash at the end of the day like I was little Tony Soprano or something. So it was good, you know, made a couple $100 a summer. That was a good business. When I was 12, 13, I started my first real business, which was a baseball card business. I was making $2,000 to $3,000 a weekend selling baseball cards in buildings that looked like this. And that was a very big business. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when you have $30,000 in cash under your bed and you're 13 and you're not selling weed, you're doing a good job. So I always claim, even though I have massive ambitions to buy the New York Jets, which will take millions and billions, of dollars in liquid, I still claim that I will never be richer than I was 13 when I had all that money. I mean, gum was like 10 cents. You got 30 grand. What do you do? So that was good. Then my dad ruined my life when I was 14. He dragged me into the liquor store, and I bagged ice for 10 hours a day for $2 an hour. That was my life every weekend and every summer day of my life. And I don't mean like kind of, I mean like my parents were so gangster. Do you guys remember in school when the last day of school was a half day? I don't know if you guys had that. By show of hands, how many people had half days for last day? I'm just curious. My mom would show up during the half day, pick me up, and take me to the store. I didn't even get a half a day in the summer. So that's how I worked. I worked every hour. I've always worked. It's kind of just what I did. And it was humbling, right? I went from making a lot of money every weekend to making 20, 30 bucks a day, doing something I hated, bagging ice. Finally, when I was 16, I was allowed upstairs, and that's when my passion kind of started kicking in. The one real specific day was a day when everybody came in asking for the same exact wine. Caymus Special Select 1990 Cabernet Sauvignon. I see some of you shaking your heads, so you might know what it is. It was named Wine of the Year by Wine Spectator, and everybody came in asking for that wine. We had sold out of it earlier, so I realized that I needed to do something about this because people were coming into the store and leaving, and that just didn't feel like a good retail move. So I decided to create a backorder system. I said the next person that comes in, I'm going to take their information, take a backorder. We didn't have a backorder system, but I wasn't too worried about it because I was going to school on Monday anyway. So next person walks in, do you have the Caymus? I go, no. I'm like, let me take a back order. He goes, okay. I'm like, how many bottles would you like? He said, well, if you can get it, I'll take 6 cases. And I said, oh shit, an alcoholic. I was like 6 cases? I was like, are you throwing a party? And he said, no, I collect wine. And that was it. Sitting in the middle of my dad's liquor store, for the first time there was something interesting to me about the business. Up until that point, I was like any other good young punk entrepreneur. I thought my dad did everything wrong, right? But I didn't have any passion to sell Budweiser or sell, Absolut vodka. And first of all, I didn't really understand the business. My dad's business was called Shoppers Discount Liquors. We sold all of those products at dead cost. I still couldn't really understand how we made money. So it was just not an interesting business. But when I realized people collected wine, I sat there and I said, okay, Frank Thomas, Ken Griffey Jr., Patrick Ewing, Silver Oak, Caymus, Chateau Lafite, same shit, I can do this. So I literally took all my passion to understanding everything about baseball cards and I applied it to wine. Instead of reading the Beckett baseball card guide every day of my life, I started reading the Wine Spectator. And no child, and I say this very seriously, no child at 16 years old should know as much about Sancerre as I did. But that's really what it was. You like that one? Let's talk about that one after. But that's what happened. I fell really madly in love with wine. I wanted to know everything, and I thought to myself, okay, when I was 13, I thought I'd open up 1,900 baseball card stores, build the McDonald's of baseball card stores, build it up, sell it, and buy the jets. For the first time ever, I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to buy 1,900 liquor stores, open them up across the whole country, build a huge business, sell it, and buy the jets. What happens next is what we're about to talk about. In college, at 18 and just about turning 19, in September of 94, about to turn 19, I'm playing Madden 94, dominating by the way. I'm playing Madden 94, and my friend runs in, he goes, you have to come and see this. And I'm like, okay, so I finish, I win. I go into the room and I sit down, I come into the room and I see my friend sitting down, my friend Tokyo Joe, I'll never forget this. He's sitting at a thing that's a computer. I knew what a computer was, but I really had never owned one. At that point I was writing, well, in theory I was supposed to write papers, I never did, but I would have written it on a word processor, And he sits there and I hear this for the first time. He goes, watch this, and I hear, remember that? Old school peeps? And there's some youngsters here. That was when AOL was ripping our faces off, literally, $4 a minute to be on the internet. Scam artists. Anyway, he dials on to the World Wide Web. I think he called it the information superhighway. By the way, I want to remind people, this is less than 20 years ago. He looks up, and I'll never forget this, he looks up at me, I'm standing over his shoulder looking at it, he looks me dead in the face, and he says, we can get chicks on this thing. He goes into an AOL chat room and types in age, sex, location. I know some of you remember ASL. Love it. That's what he did. And literally I looked at it and it took me about 25 seconds as he was getting to the message board and I said, I can sell shit on this thing. And literally I had to wait my turn. So it was like 3 in the morning because like 9 other guys got on for like an hour or two to talk to chicks, probably other dudes acting as chicks. And I got on and I went to a baseball card bulletin board and I tried to figure out how to sell stuff. Later that day, I realized when I woke up the next day, I'm like, holy cow. It was the first time ever I didn't want to own 1,900 liquor stores. Yeah. I realized maybe I don't need any. Maybe I can sell through this. And so I started learning what that was. And 2 years later, I launched winelibrary.com for a couple reasons. 1, I wanted to have an e-commerce business. 2, I hated the name of my family business, which was Shoppers Discount Liquors, and I wanted to make sure we changed it. And I convinced my dad to spend $15,000 to build a website. A couple interesting things about that. 1, Alex from Spacegate. As a matter of fact, camera guy, can you zoom in on my face? I have a message to send to him if you ever see this. Alex, fuck you. Alex from Spacegate charged me $15,000 to build a website. I learned a lot more about the web in upcoming years. It probably took about 38 minutes of HTML to build the site. Here's where it gets really interesting. We launched the site, and in the first year of WineLibrary.com, we sold, cost us $15,000, we sold $854 in wine. How's that for ROI? And I don't know how many of you have a Soviet father, but that did not go over super well with Sasha. And he used to yell at me, something I don't say often. Actually, I don't think I've ever said this in a speech. I used to go up to the computer and try to build this site and figure stuff out. He'd yell at me, stop playing with the computer, go on the floor and sell wine. But what's interesting is 36 months later, that same site, a different one, we had to rebuild it. Can you zoom? No, that same URL sold $4.1 million in wine. And so what I'm going to talk to you about the rest of this speech is why I think I can buy the New York Jets, which is predicated on this. I always think about a couple of things. Two things. One, what does the consumer right this minute think they're not going to do that I know you're going to do? Right now, how many of you are familiar with what Google Glass is? The Google Glasses? Just raise your hand, I'm just curious for context. So, most of you. I know a lot of you think you're not going to wear them, but I know you're going to. And so that's what I think about. The other thing I think about is, how do I market practically, innovatively enough for the world's going to be in 24 or 36 months so I can afford it? So I can innovate far enough into the future to let the market and the money come to me, but not too far out because it's not practical. Right now, I think about Google Glass. I think about every night when I'm falling asleep, besides how much I love my family, I think about things like, what would happen if I built an app on Google Glass that if you wore and you downloaded the app, that every time you looked at a wine label, my review would show up? These are things I think about now. I know that's coming. That's a done deal. That will happen. The problem is when and how and what's the adoption. So I don't think that's 24 months away. It may be, but I don't have a way to execute it within the next 24 months, and so it stays in my mind. Social has been really interesting to me. It's been very fascinating to me to watch it. It was very obvious to me. The first time I ever spoke was ironically an event that looked similar to this. It was a Chamber of Commerce event in New Jersey, and it was in 1997. And I was talking, and the person that spoke before me, it was a business marketing summit, and the person that spoke before me worked for this company. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. I don't know if they're even still around. It's called the Yellow Pages, right? And so he worked for the Yellow Pages, and he talked about the value of the Yellow Pages and this and that. And I met the guy in the back room, and I got to talking to him, and he's like, what are you going to talk about? And I started talking about how I think people are going to spend money on the internet, put their credit card into a computer. And he was super awesome. He was like, just like, you got it, kid. And then his final thing on stage, after he finished his presentation, he's like, oh, by the way, how many of you, this is probably why I still do the how many of you, which I'll do multiple times soon, how many of you in this room would ever put your credit card into a computer? And one lousy person raised their hand out of the whole audience. This was a very different time. I see people shaking their head. They remember. You were scared. And he goes, oh, funny, this kid that's about to come up is going to tell you how you're all going to buy wine on the computer, and left. Two things. One, fucking gangster. Like the kind of stuff I would pull off. So I kind of respect him still in some weird, dark way. Number two, I got up there and my opening line was, I'm really sad that this wasn't being recorded because I'd love to one day look back at this because this guy's going to be on the wrong side of history. And then I went into my talk. How many people in here, and remember, I'm going to ask you a question, I want you to raise your hand. I want to just make this one statement as we go through this next phase of the talk. Lying is the devil. How many people in this room were scared to put their credit card at one point into a computer? Please raise your hand high. I want context. Very nice. Of the people that were scared, how many of you have put a credit card into a computer? Right. So, that's what happened there. Later, other things happened, and things that I think about. I will tell you this one. Mobile devices, this thing, is probably the single most important thing in the world. Let me show you how. How many people in this room, by show of hands, are never, including when they're sleeping, never, ever, not arm's length away from their phone? Raise your hand. Raise them. 50% of this audience, every moment of their lives, including when they're sleeping, are at least within arm's length of their telephone. So, telephone, single most important thing, the robot that we were promised, it is the thing. How many people in this room, 12 to 15 years ago, said the following thing? That's nice, because there's some gray hairs in this audience. So I'm gonna get some hands right here. Ready? How many people in this room 12 or 15 years ago said the following? I'm not getting a cell phone. Why would I want people to contact me anytime they want? If I want to get a hold of them, I'll get a hold of them. Rewind in your mind. Remember that lying is the devil. Raise your hand if you said that you were not going to get a cell phone, either out loud or to yourself. Raise your hands. Raise them. Just want to look. Good. About 15, 20, good. Just curious, of the 25 of you, how many of you do not have a cell phone? 0. Just curious, who in here does not have a cell phone? Holy crap. Oh, it was stolen. Amazing. That was pretty awesome. So everybody has a cell phone. Yet many people, and again, you know, I remember vividly because I was in the wine business buying wine, and a lot of my salespeople, when I needed wine, they all had pagers. Right? And I kept telling them, get a fucking cell phone. They're like, no. They'd like have to find a payphone and call me, and then the wine would sell out. I'd get pissed. I wanted my dad to buy them cell phones. That didn't work. But, you know, that's kind of like a very vivid memory. How about this one? How many people in this room, probably about 5 years ago, said this doozy, either to somebody else or within their own mind? I'm not getting a Facebook account. Why in the world would I get a Facebook account? That's for kids. I promise you, I will never have a Facebook account. Raise them. Raise your hand if you thought or said that you would never have a Facebook account. Very nice. Just curious, of the more than half of this room, how many of you that raised your hand, by show of hands, now do have a Facebook account? That's what I thought. By the way, how many people here do not have a Facebook account? Stand up, real quick. Just stand up. I know you're too young, you're waiting for it, respect, but you can stand. Anne, mother-in-law, stand up, I saw your hand. Get up, I saw you, stand up. Stand up if you do not have a Facebook account. Very good. Let's clap it up for these 11 holdouts. Fight the system. Fight it. By the way, when this conference is over for the 11 of you, your horse is waiting outside to take you home. The only thing I think is interesting about social media is this. The only thing I've ever tried to do in my career, even going all the way back to Lemonade, do you know what I did when we had the lemonade stands? I walked the streets of Edison, New Jersey. The 80s were a different time. I could never consider letting my children do what my mom, I walked 86 miles away from home, and you can do anything you want. I walked the streets of Edison, New Jersey, and I would sit on the ground, and I would watch cars drive on the street, and I would try to figure out which tree or post to put my sign up to most likely make them see it so that they would buy lemonade. You like that, Linda? Because that's what I did. Weird as shit. It took me a long time to remember that that's what I did, but that's what I did. That speaks to what I'm doing with social media and what I'm trying to do with my whole career and forever. The only job we all have to do, every one of you, no matter if you're B2B or B2C in this room, no matter what you do for a living, solo, big company, our #1 jobs are to tell the story to the consumer somewhere along the point of purchase, get into their eyes or ears, into their brain, so they're aware and they convert, period. Now, if that's our jobs, then how are we disrespecting platforms that have hundreds of millions of users that spend hours at a time in those platforms? We did it, we respected it on television and radio and outdoor because they're driving, they see it. We respect it in many other places, but we've had a hard time swallowing or respecting that we have to figure out how to storytell where the consumer is. There are people, listen, here's all you need to know about social networks. Are you guys familiar with soap operas? You know that thing? Right? Huge, right? Started as radio. Guiding Light started on the radio. People used to stand around a thing that looked like this, lean on it and go, that's some scandalous shit, right? They would literally listen to soap operas on the radio. converted to television, fought off every shift in television history. Remember the game show era when I was sick? When I used to make pretend I was sick to stay home from school? I'd watch the Whammy and all that shit. Game shows. Fought off Donahue and Oprah. Talk shows. Fought off every genre of television. Stayed in business, dominated, started by a consumer packaged good product, by the way. Soap operas, dominated. Soap operas went out of business in the last couple of years. Do you know why? Farmville. Let's talk about this for a second. If you look at how many people here are not familiar with what Farmville is? Raise your hand, I just want to make sure, just to see how much I have to explain. So not too many. Farmville was a game on Facebook. Just to explain it, people would create a virtual farm, and they would feed their virtual sheep with virtual fucking hay. Got it? Farmville. When you go back and look at the data of Farmville, from the hours of noon Eastern until 6 p.m. Eastern, which is 3 p.m. Pacific, had its height of usage mainly predicated on 25 to 55-year-old females. So, the reason people stopped watching General Hospital and One Life to Live was because they wanted to feed a tomato to their virtual cow on Facebook. And so what's interesting about that is it's funny, it's a funny story, but I believe that it's every business's job to figure out how to storytell where the consumer's attention is. And companies started to do that. All of a sudden you started seeing food companies sponsor the seeds and all these things, and they started gaining the impressions and the awareness. How many people in this room cannot wait to leave this last talk, are thinking right now in their mind as they're listening to this, they can't wait to run home, open their mailbox, and go through their direct mail carefully. Multi-billion-dollar industry, direct mail, to tell our stories, and yet, very few people at this point in a 2013 world run home to go through their direct mail. Most of you get all those catalogs, which are plenty of dollars each, throw them in the garbage, never open them, blah, blah, blah. How many people here, when they watch television outside of live sports, and now I'm including Sunday nights because I'm realizing how many people watch on Sunday nights at that time. Sunday nights, live sports. If it is not on Sunday night or live sports, how many of you here are watching the majority of your television now on demand? Whether it's DVR, on demand, Hulu, all that. The majority of your television outside of live sports on demand. Raise it high, because I see certain people looking around baffled by the shocking sheer number, which is, oh, by the way, about 90% of this room. How many people in 2013, in the last 6 months, how many of you on DVR, since a lot of you are doing that, have fast-forwarded every single commercial? 70% of this audience has not consumed a commercial on television, yet a lot of my clients and a lot of the great companies in this world are spending tens of billions of dollars collectively trying to tell the story to the end consumer where they think the consumer is. The problem is our habits have changed. Here's another habit change. Outdoor media. If you've ever driven to Newark Airport or been through New Jersey, I love outdoor media. I put billboards of myself up, watch my wine show. I love it. I love outdoor media, right? But I want you to do me one favor when you guys leave this conference. When you leave here today, when you're driving home, I want you to do me one favor. Drive home and look at 3 to 5 people. Let's just call it 5. I want you to look at 5 people. Look at 5 other cars carefully and look at the driver. I promise you, 2 or 3 of those drivers are texting while they're driving. Guys, Oprah is right. It is getting dangerous out there. I actually now drive with 2 hands because I'm far more scared about everybody else. So 2 to 3 of your people that are driving by you, I promise you, are looking and texting on their phone. So my friends, people aren't looking at billboards anymore. They're not even looking at the fucking road. Habit change. How many people here can't wait to get home tonight, get on their computer, rush to their favorite website, and then look to the right side of the website and click a fucking banner ad? Who's into it? $20 billion industry, banner ads, storytelling, and yet, let's chew on these 2 fun facts. Number 1, a successful banner ad campaign for a major company is a 0.01 click-through. Can I just ask, Westchester, when did 0.01 of anything be successful? Billions of dollars, nobody here is clicking banner ads. Who's clicking banner? Who here has clicked 5 banner ads in the last 2 years? 5. Raise it, own it, it's okay. I'll make fun of you later. You close them with the close buttons. I respect that. I need to talk about all, how old are you? 12, you and I, after this talk, 20 minutes, I need to know everything about everything you do. Okay? Thank you. 0.01% for banner ads. $20 billion of us trying to tell our stories, 0.01. Google, SEO and SEM. How many people here have done SEO or SEM for their businesses or business partners? Raise your hand high. Great thing. Built my business on it. 2000, used to buy the word wine for winelibrary.com for 5 cents before the minimum was 10 cents. 9 months before anybody bid me up. Killed it, right? Yet, this year, Google reporting 15% decline in banner in SEM click-through. You know why? Habit change. Remember when we used to do everything on Google? Remember when anything you thought you went to Google? Now, Google's become information, right? If you need information, you go. But when you want recommendation, go look at what people are tweeting and Facebooking day in and day out. What's the best restaurant? Where would you go? What do you guys think? The information's now coming through social. So the real competitor, conceivably long-term, to Google and search is a social search that actually brings us value. I know that thousands of people would much rather get my recommendation on Chardonnay or Merlot or Pinot Grigio than somebody who figured out how to black hat SEO play and be the first result for it. So the context matters. The context matters quite a bit in impressions as well. Banner ads on mobile devices. Have you guys picked up on some of these pop-up ads on your mobile device? You want to talk about something that really pisses you off? Banner ads on the right side of a website, at least you don't have to look at it. By the way, incredible study coming out from Stanford that I just got a peek at, that if you're under 27 or 26 years old, you actually don't even see the right side of most websites. That when you're asked to recall what you just saw on a website, you don't go because we subconsciously have trained ourselves to realize that's where the banner ads are, that's nothing for me, I'm not even, don't even see it. Don't even see it. Sorry. See it. Sorry, just testing some stuff. All right, so what about the context of the ad? So one of the things that I'm very fascinated by right now is you may talk about the impressions your ad got, or your banner ad got, or how many people opened your email or got through. But what about the context? I can tell you right now, proudly, I'm going to say this in front of everybody here, I will never buy a Samsung product again. Here's why. During the last couple of months, Darrelle Revis was being rumored to get traded. That led me to be on ESPN.com 78 times a day. Every single time, or every third time, that I tried to go to ESPN.com, oh, by the way, on this screen, which is quite small, a Samsung banner ad popped up and stopped me from doing what I wanted to do. Every time I clicked out of it, sometimes my thumb was a little too fat, and I clicked into a Samsung experience. Back home, at agency and Samsung world, they're very excited. 78 impressions, 9 click-throughs. Samsung, let me just give you news. I'm not buying any of your product, and I hate you, and now I'm telling hundreds of people I hate you, because what you've done is brought me no value to me, and instead, that impression is negative. So we have to start debating as storytellers and as marketers the value and context of the impression, not just the overall numbers of the impressions. So here's what I'm talking about. Here's what I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by the history of all this. I'm fascinated by Leo Burnett. Leo Burnett had an agency in Chicago back in the day, and here's what Leo Burnett did that I'm fascinated by. In the 60s, people watched television. You guys, some of the people in the 60s and 70s, you guys remember watching television? Yes. You know what was really great about TV back then? No remote. So you had to watch the fucking commercials, right? Because you weren't getting up every time and changing. Well, maybe you were, but you know. So, tons of commercials. The Leo Burnett Company did something very interesting to me. They understood the psychology of why you were on and watching television. They understood the key things, which was escapism and characters and things of that nature. So what I'm really fascinated by is that the Leo Burnett Company understood the psychology of what you were doing there, so they gave you more of that. They're the people